All right, I am calling the Wednesday, October 27th, 2021 Code Review Task Force meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. The clerk will note that all members are present, or the following members are joining via Zoom: Sarah Albrecht. I believe every other member is present. Members of the public may attend in person or participate online via Zoom at zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 952-5582-0738. Once you log into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator if you wish to speak to a particular item. More information is available in the agenda packet and on the city website. Now onto the agenda. The first item of the meeting tonight is adoption of the agenda. City Manager Lee, does staff have any changes to the agenda?
We do not, Chair.
Okay. Do any task force members have any changes? May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion.
Jensen moves. Can I have a second? Godin seconds. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay and raise your hand. The motion carries. The second item of the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 25th meeting and the September 29th meeting. Does staff have any changes to the minutes?
We do.
We do.
We do.
In your package, you noticed that there was a highlighted section where in August, let me find it really quick. Page number
Yes, page
is on.
2.
So, it's hard to tell. So it's like the second page of your, of the August meeting. And this was the motion regarding the hardship fee waiver. Motion by Rouse and seconded by, we could not catch that. It was not, does anybody remember who seconded that motion?
No.
No, you don't, okay, right. Okay, that's all I needed.
Okay. Do any task force members have changes? May I have a motion to approve the minutes from both August 25th and September 29th?
Motion.
Motion by Jensen. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ward. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay and raise your hand. Motion carries. Okay, reviewing outstanding items. Consider establishing a quorum that is less than a majority of the task force members. So currently today, our task force body stands at 11 members, and a quorum traditionally defined might be, would be 6 members. I would like to suggest to this body that we consider 5 members. 5 members would allow us to meet and conduct business and vote on items. We had a meeting last month where, for a confluence of issues, sickness, maybe a lack of understanding on the particular open meeting regulations, we were unable to meet and we had to push back our agenda a full month. We did have one person who has resigned from the commission from last time, and so we went from a quorum of 7 to 6. I'd like to clarify with council if that is lawful for us to do. My understanding with Robert's Rule of Order is that it would be lawful for us to change the quorum. Is there any legal objection to that?
No, we could vote as a body to change the quorum. We would like that decision. If this body makes that decision, we would like that decision to be reviewed and approved by the city council,
Okay.
because they're the ultimate body that established the task force.
Okay. All right. So would anyone have strong feelings about this? I'd like to throw this out for discussion. Shelley?
Mr. Chairperson, why would we consider conducting business if we don't have a majority of the members present? think that would go against representing what this task force is supposed to accomplish, and if people cannot consistently attend, then we need to look at whether the membership is appropriate rather than change the quorum.
Okay. Michael?
The only thing I have is, in the next couple, starting in December, I may be unable to show up to some of the meetings. And I know if I go online, I can't be a voting member unless it's through a medical exemption, which is what it would be for, because I would need. So I guess I'm curious if we can, how we go about getting the medical exemption, how many days ahead is that? And if there's a limitation, if it's only like 3 months or something like that, I guess.
Can staff comment on that? Or
Jared, do you want to
counsel?
talk
Yeah.
a little bit about the medical exemption component, please?
Yeah, in your situation, the medical exemption would, we just need to be aware that you're not attending the meeting and make it clear that you're attending remotely because of that medical exemption, and we'd be fine. Cool, I don't know if you have any other
Just,
comments on that.
just so you, the task force knows that we're operating under an interpretation of the statute that is not shared by many people. Certain city attorneys have opined similar to what we have, but the Data Practices Office at the state that also does open meeting law advisories has not been as willing to deviate based on medical exemptions for ADA or other reasons. They've taken some more restrictive opinions. So I just want you to know that we are being liberal or aggressive, depending on how you want to characterize it, with our determination that as an advisory body, we want as much participation as we can, and effective participation by the people that aren't able to attend because of medical reasons. But that opinion isn't shared by everyone, and we may get some opinions down the way that require us to change our opinion. But right now, we're as entitled to our opinion, our view as the state office is, and we're going to advise our clients the way we have to try to allow people to participate in spite of disabilities or physical limitations or logistical problems. So just so you know that it's not locked down, and this is an evolving question and issue that we might have to revise going forward. But at least initially, we can accommodate that situation. We plan to.
Okay. Nancy?
Remind me, we have 11 official members?
Yes.
And 10 of us are here, but I heard you say we're all here, so,
Yeah, and we have Sarah.
right.
Sarah's the 11th one on the Zoom, on the TV.
Sarah's
She's
participating
attending.
remotely.
I got
Okay.
that, but okay. I'm
She just can't vote for
not
that.
counting right. All right.
Yep. And so, right now, the quorum would be for 6, and we're well above that. And this is just I haven't even made a motion of it, it's just a thought that I'd like to throw out there. Robert's Rules of Orders makes it pretty clear that there's certain motions, there's certain types of things that you can't change without pre-noticing. For example, we can't change, I had to put this on the agenda to discuss this. It'd be out of order for me to bring up changing the quorum without everyone being notified. And so if people don't think that there's value in this, the thing that where I think there might be value is this is a very iterative process where we go back and forth and we review this, and this is probably the 3rd time now that we've reviewed Title I, Chapters 1 through 6. And so I personally don't think anything's gonna sneak through. And then ultimately, it's gonna be probably another session or 2 before we even would take that and submit it to the city council. And that's pretty much the operating confines of our charter, is just looking at that. And so that would allow us to continue discussion and would allow us to hear from the subject matter experts and continue to explore things. And in the case of last month, where we had 2 people who were able to join for the conversation, but weren't able to vote, we would have been able to still conduct business, and we could have made forward progress if we would have adjusted the quorum to 5. So that is my reasoning behind it. So I will form it in a motion, and I will look for a second then. Go ahead, yes?
I have one question. It could be 5 people on, in person,
Yep,
and if 1 or 2 can join, remote,
yep,
they already have a chance to input because, 2 weeks before the meeting, they have made the input what they have. So, the inputs are already in place, and they can also do the input over the, only thing that changes is the voting.
yes, that would be the only thing that would change, would be
Yeah, so
potentially the
it-
voting.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's not like they're excluded in any way, except in voting.
That is correct.
Okay, just want to clarify that.
So I would propose, I move that the quorum be adjusted from 6 members to 5 members. Can I get a second?
Just wanted to ask one more question.
Okay? So you can ask
Are
a
we
point of
doing
order.
this based on a percentage?
What's that?
So we would be, instead of it being over 50%, it would now be
Strictly 5
like
members.
40-something, or, okay. Obviously, in the future, we can change this if we need to. Hypothetically, 2 people resign, then we're down to 9, and then we go, I guess I'm just curious, why don't we just have it a percentage?
That's what it is by default, yes.
Well, I'm saying, so, the disability organization I run, we have people, it's usually up to like 36 people who can vote. Most disabled people don't end up showing up to a lot of things just because they can't. So we actually put ours at 20%
Sure.
because of it. I know that's extremely low.
Sure.
It works for us because just a lot of people just have medical things that they just can't show up to or something like that. So I guess I was just curious, why isn't it just a percentage?
Well, I think, just in my own personal reflection on it, I think that to do business at 3 or 4 people, I think we would have to do some serious soul searching. If we can't muster 3 people, then I'm not for sure what we're doing
I'm not
as a
suggesting the
commission.
20%.
What's that?
I'm not suggesting to do the same 20%.
Sure,
we're
but
doing.
we can only have whole persons, so 5 is the next closest number.
I guess, like I said, if we lose members though, then,
I'm gonna pause you for a second, and I'll say, I have a motion on the floor. If I can get a second, we can debate it. Otherwise, my motion will fail, and we will move on to new business.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now we can have a formal debate on it. Cody?
Question, can we add also, make it 6, but if at least 1 person, if is on remote. So 5 people in person plus 1, at least 1 on, so 1 remotely, so at least the quorum type number of people are there to give the inputs, if
Okay.
not to vote.
I understand. I think what you're saying. Is such a thing like that lawful?
I don't, the quorum shouldn't be tied to the remote participation, just the general remote participation. I want to make sure that we're distinguishing between participation remotely for ADA purposes, which would be full participation, versus if someone just can't leave the house for whatever reason, COVID, for example, then that would be something different. And so for that kind of general scenario you're talking about, we would need the quorum to be here live.
Okay. And then I think maybe to further clarify, Sarah tonight has joined us online, and as I understand it, because she's not in a public location and that was not advertised. And maybe it's not clear if this is a medical exemption. So she, I don't believe, is a voting member currently tonight. So just because you are online, like we had last time, where we had 2 members who were online, but because we didn't follow the open meeting procedures, they couldn't participate in the voting. Therefore, they weren't part of the quorum. Do other people have opinions on this? Nancy?
I'm not all that excited about changing it, but I'm just wondering if the concern is that if we set it at 5, if the number of members drops, are you assuming we would revert back to half plus 1 with that, or would it stay at 5 even if there are only 6 members left?
We could certainly clarify.
I'm just, I don't know if that's the, personally, I don't think we should change it and just make it easier, and it stays at half plus 1.
Okay. Are there other opinions? Other discussion?
I really don't have much of an opinion. However, to my point is that part of this, if we're gonna have this many people involved, there's gonna have to be very good communication. And if people are missing meetings and it all of a sudden happens, all of a sudden on the day of the meeting, so be it. I'm not quite sure logistically that we're gonna lose that many people on the day of a meeting. So I'm wondering if we could just actually let all the people, all the members know that if you're not going to be here, that we really, really need to communicate that to city staff. And that if we are in any way in a gray area or jeopardy of missing a quorum, then we just cancel the meeting and we don't waste everybody's time by coming here and not having people show up. That is my plan B. I would say that we're all adults here, and if you're not gonna be here, tell somebody so that we can move forward, that we can, because really what we're doing is we're planning for people that, what we're doing is we're making accommodations for people to not communicate to us. And I don't know that that's the best approach.
Okay. All right. Are there any other opinions on this? Steve?
So I'm in support of the proposal because I second it. I do believe we want to make progress. And so, you know, there are times, if, to my understanding what you said, let's say someone here got COVID, right? They'd be potentially remote, but couldn't vote, correct? So I don't think we want to put ourselves in a position where we're delaying and just adding and adding and adding on to the amount of work that we have to go through in one meeting and approve. I think we should allow ourselves some simplicity. And then if other task force members choose to not participate, we can revisit it. But I think we gotta have some means to move forward, knowing we're still in an environment where COVID is a potential.
If I might, Jared, I think that if somebody has COVID and they have been medically advised by their doctor not to be in public, then they would fall under the medical exception as we interpret it. Am I correct?
Currently, yes, correct.
So they would be able to vote.
Okay, I thought you said differently.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I just was rattling off the top of my head about different reasons.
Can we get the opinion of our third lawyer now?
She's a tiebreaker.
No, I mean, it's interesting just simply because the law does treat COVID, just in the short term, not as a disability, but in the long term, if you suffer from the long-term effects of COVID, then it is treated generally as a disability for the purposes of the ADA. So I think that's probably what he was thinking about when he mentioned it earlier. So.
So what I said, except substitute COVID with the flu.
Sure.
So that, I guess that's my point
Okay.
of support.
And I would echo that. Yes, Michael?
Is there a notice date on when these things, like, the notice has to be in order to qualify for the exemption? Like I said, because, you know, my health is in the crapper.
From a health perspective, no. But if I wanted to say, go to Wisconsin and take the meeting there virtually, I have to let the city know, I believe, within the week before they publish, right?
Right, so
And
that
then
we
they
can be
advertise
part of the
it.
publicized packet, so that that information is public. And then, yes, and then your location would be public, and and then you would be able to vote, and that exception, or that allowance is up to 3 times per year. Where that's without a medical.
Okay.
Medical doesn't have a deadline.
Because today I just had cancer treatment on my arms, and they didn't know how long it was gonna take.
Sure.
And I wrote in beforehand, because they then told me how long it was gonna take. It was originally an hour, and they said, oh, it could be up to 3 hours, and I was like, well, I'll miss the thing then. So I had that, and I tried sending out an email, but I found out just yesterday. that-
Thank you, Michael. I think that you're covered, and certainly we'll absolutely work with you to make sure that you can absolutely participate.
Yeah, I'm always gonna try to come here as quick as I can. I guess the, one more thing is,
Yep.
if we could put like, well, I guess we'll have to consider this as another motion later, for another day, to have restrictions. If you miss like 3 things in a row, I think you should not be part of the process anymore.
I think that that's a separate issue that we
That's
should
what I'm
handle
saying, but
separately.
I think like,
But, yes.
The council does have a policy, and it's directed for the commissions, and this is similar to, this is an advisory body, of course. So, and the council's policy is, I believe, 75%. So 3 meetings would probably, you'd be missing more than 75% at that point. So, we did have a member that didn't show up for the first 3 meetings, and she did resign, but if she hadn't, the council could have removed her for absence.
okay.
I think this is our first probably official vote on something that we've actually really talked about. The agenda items I don't really consider. So I don't want to stop the discussion, but we need to make forward progress. So I will call for the vote. So the proposal is that the quorum should be set to 5 persons. And if you agree with that, would you please vote by signifying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you disagree, please vote by signifying with nay and raise your hand.
Nay.
2. The ayes have it. Okay. Our next item is to, let's see, item 3, review any outstanding, any other outstanding items. City Manager Lee, do you have any updates?
We do not, Chair.
Okay. Perfect. Item 4 is questions and comments from the task force. These comments are included in tonight's meeting packet. Do the city attorneys or staff have anything to add?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Do any task force members have any further comments? Yes.
I need to ask about the process. It feels like this first chunk, we've talked and discussed and talked and discussed, and I guess I thought we would submit our questions, we would get them back in writing at a meeting at which we discuss, and apparently we then have yet another meeting after that for further legal input and clarification?
I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. So maybe you can direct that at council or?
Maybe I could try that, Nancy. The way it's laid out is you get it a month ahead of time, opportunity to provide comments. That subsequent meeting, we talk through those comments, incorporate them, and then that 3rd meeting is when we would have this action final review and approval. And I think from a staff perspective, we didn't anticipate much discussion at this 3rd step. You're seeing it again here tonight because we didn't have any, there was some additional discussion last month and there's some additional clarification. I think the chair would be looking for are there any questions from the clarification we provided last month? If not, I believe we'd be looking for a motion in a second to approve what's been presented and discussed.
Okay. Good. Yeah,
Does that help?
yeah.
Are there any other comments on the questions? Okay, and I don't believe that, it's not clear to me that that requires a vote to accept. I don't have it in my script, so I will not ask for one.
For the
For the.
question,
for the
item number
questions.
4? No.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 5, which is the final review and approval of Title I, Chapters 1 through 6.
I'd move to approve.
I would rule that out of order at this time. And what I'd like to describe for the process is I would like us to briefly go through each section and ask if there are any final items for us to mention, and if there are not, then at the end we shall approve, if that's acceptable.
Can I question whether
Sure.
it feels like overkill. It feels like we've discussed this about 4 times already. So
Sure.
going through section by section wouldn't be my preference, but if I'm the only one, then so be it.
Sure.
Point of order, how's that our order that she made a motion on this?
Maybe I'm incorrect.
At any given time, we can make a motion up at the dais, that if we can be in the middle of a discussion and stop it right then and there and make a motion. I'm not sure how that's out of a motion, if you have a
People
first.
could
you have a
not
first and
second
a
it
second.
or vote it down.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
We're all learning.
Learning.
It's not my intention to shut you down, Nancy. I personally have 2 things on my list that I would like to talk about in chapters 1 through 6, but that is me. I don't know if other people do.
You can take a motion in a second and have a discussion after the motion's been made. To stop a motion, it's not out of order for her to make a motion.
It's my understanding that that motion would have to be resolved before we could make further motions.
No, you can have a second for purpose of
And
discussion.
then discuss the item.
Yes, but if there were then subsequent motions, don't those have to be resolved?
I've only heard one motion.
It's like Magic the Gathering, the last one is always the one that is resolved first.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, can you restate the motion that's on the floor?
I believe Nancy's motion is to accept chapters 1 through 6 as currently written.
Okay.
Is there a second? The motion fails.
There you go.
Okay. I apologize to you, Nancy.
No big deal.
We're all growing in this process together. Like to look through chapter 1. Does anyone have anything specifically in chapter 1 that they'd like to bring up? Chapter 1. Hearing nothing, we'll move forward. Chapter 2, which is the savings clause. Does anyone have any items in chapter 2 that they would like to bring up? Chapter 3 is the definitions chapter. Does anyone have any items in chapter 3 that they'd like to bring up? Okay. Chapter 4 is the penalty chapter. Are there any items in chapter 4 people would like to bring up? Chapter 5, are there any items? I do have an item or 2. I have a question on 156, actually related to quorum. It says that at all council meetings, a majority of council members shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. but a smaller number may meet from time to time. Is the mayor part of the council?
Yes.
And if the mayor is absent, it says that the clerk may be there in their stead. Does the clerk have voting power?
No. The acting mayor sits in or stands in for the mayor if the mayor is absent.
We have, every 6 months, that acting mayor rotates per council action.
Gotcha. Thank you. When a smaller than quorum, it says, but a smaller number may meet from time to time, I assume that they can't vote, but it still has to be open, is that?
Correct, Mr. Chair, the basic reason that this language is in place here is it matches up with court interpretations or attorney general opinions that say basically the 2 members of a 5-member body could meet to adjourn the meeting and reschedule it to a later date, even though they can't take business. The only business they can do is basically announce to the public the rescheduled meeting at which they anticipate they would have the quorum. And the language is outdated. That's why the word adjourn was in there previously. That is how the vernacular that was used 30 or 40 years ago when the decisions were made, that would adjourn from time to time to set up the meeting. But it's covered under the open meeting law interpretations that's the limitation of their ability to act.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question on a different section, 1512B. This is the personal liability defense of public officials exceptions. It says no legal counsel or defense shall be provided for consultants, advisors, or others retained to perform services who are not on the city payroll. It would be, I'm wondering, are commission members who are unpaid volunteers in that list then, who are not protected by the city?
No. You are considered employees or volunteers. Consultants, advisors, or others retained would be the city attorney's office, engineer, planning, other professional services, not commission members or task force members.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on chapter 5? Any questions on chapter 6? Okay, so I think then, thank you for your patience. I greatly appreciate it. I would gladly accept a motion to approve chapters 1 through 6. Motion by Jensen. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by O'Brien. All those in favor of approving Title I, Chapters 1 through 6, as written, signify by saying aye. And raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed, signify by saying nay and raise your hand. The ayes have it. Excellent. Item 6 is the review of Title I, Chapters 7 through 12. These chapters were included in the meeting packet with staff suggested edits. Review of Title II was moved to the November 17th meeting to allow for more time and comments from the task force. Review Chapters 7 through 12 discussion. The final version of these chapters will come before us for approval at the next meeting. I would suggest that in similar fashion, maybe we go through just kind of that same way. We start with the 7th chapter and continue. There are specific points that are called out where there's, as an example, in 181, it says, question from task force member about definition of this. And I'm not for sure if that's something we still need to resolve as a body, or if there's something that needs to come out of that. That's kind of what I would recommend maybe we go through, but open to other ideas.
Chair, may I make a comment? Just for the task force understanding, I believe, whatever item it was, number 4, questions and comments for the task force that we passed by earlier, that includes previous questions that were asked about chapters 7 through 12, and then there's an updated memoranda that includes comments from that last meeting. So many of the items that we will pass through that include the comments on the side should be addressed now with a new strike-through.
Okay, so, what we're reading tonight then is the most up-to-date, is that correct?
It should be, yeah. And those, so those new strike-throughs should be reflected in the text of chapter 7 through 12, but also in the memo
Yes.
that was in the agenda packet.
But not,
The clarification, so should I be looking at the one that is linked on the agenda on my computer, or the one that is printed here, because I'm noticing that they are different?
I didn't know that there were any changes from last month, and I had already printed them out, so this was from last month. So if there are changes, then you may not be in here. So I apologize, I didn't know there were additional changes from last month.
Okay.
Does anybody need paper copies of? Okay.
Please.
Okay, so, chapter 7, are there, it's a very short chapter, are there any items for discussion on chapter 7?
I don't know how official you need to be, but my name is spelled slightly differently than it is in here.
Well, we should get that
UE
corrected.
instead of EU, so
It's okay, we'll get that corrected.
I don't care, just in case someone does.
That was my fault, so I apologize.
The very
You could
first
switch
one
seats
was
with Joel
misspelled.
for that. Other items, chapter 7? Okay. Chapter 8 then, Code of Ethics. Are there questions regarding chapter 8 or points of discussion?
Can I ask one on 7, backing up, I was
Oh,
just
sure.
kind of re-skimming it. I'm not seeing, and maybe this was discussed last month, how one gets on the absentee ballot board. Is that described and I just missed it perhaps? I see the composition and that the council establishes it, but how, is there a process to be on it that needs to be in here? Like a application process, or it's just, it's established and it gets created when it's created?
So, Joel or Matt can chime in when she gets back, but from my experience, an absentee ballot board is generally made up of city staff
Okay.
and election officials
Sure.
who understand the process, and that constitutes the absentee ballot board.
Thank you.
And I'm getting nods by legal, so that's always a good sign.
And it's set by statute, so the way it's drafted here is if the statute changes for it, then we don't have to modify the code.
Thank you. Chapter 8, Code of Ethics. Yes.
I did ask a question and it was answered here, so.
Can you, would you mind calling out the section?
It was 1817C,
Okay.
receiving anything of value. And so, my question was around voting on things where you may have a financial interest, or let's say a significant other in your family has a financial interest, that you'd have to declare that, and trade on any information that you become aware of as a result of your position. So the answer was that's covered in the state statutes, is that correct?
Mm-hmm, as well as council code of conduct.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on chapter 8? Chapter 9, deferred special assessments.
I just appreciate the clarification of spouse to joint owners. being one of those.
Or trusts?
A joint owner, not a spouse.
I had on 193, the disability provision, the text currently says that retirement by reason of permanent and total disability shall be deemed prima facie to exist when the applicant presents a sworn affidavit by a licensed medical doctor attesting that the applicant is unable to be gainfully employed because of a permanent and total disability. I'm personally thinking that, and you can see this right above here, that Burnsville probably shouldn't be in the business of re-verifying disability status based off of just having to get medical records, but to my understanding, there is a process for declaring disability in the state, and that if someone can prove that they're on the state disability rolls, that should be sufficient. I don't know if that is feasible. I don't know if that presents a hardship to people, but a licensed doctor means many things. It could mean my chiropractor. It could mean my naturalist doctor who has a license. Sarah, do you have oh, okay.
Information, do you know if that's this way? I'm not sure. Okay.
Keep someone else on. Is Ryan on? Okay, can you mute him?
Are you able to hear me?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
Who are you?
it's Ryan.
Who's,
I thought it was background noise.
This is, I think Ryan Peterson, our Public Works Director, is
Okay.
on remotely. Ryan, is that you?
Yes, Melanie, it's Ryan. I'm the public works director here in town. And I've overseen the engineering department, which does the special assessments for the city. And basically, we take the word of, if we get a good document in from signed by a doctor, we're not going and checking 5 different ways to make sure it's the case. So they just have to provide something that's just kind of what it says in there. It's worked well for us throughout the years. We haven't ever gotten into a situation where we've had to go back and forth 5, 10 times on something like this.
okay. Is there, just kind of a general knowledge question, is there would there be a central point of contact if someone wanted, if the city wanted to verify that someone was receiving state disability, would there be an easy way to do that, other than just accepting a doctor's note from someone?
I would say it's probably
Um,
private medical data, and we would
so-
have to accept something that the individual would provide to us.
Yes.
Okay,
So there wouldn't be a database or anything.
okay.
I mean, you can be on.
They're also, Madam Mayor, they're also, they have to show that they're not making any or very little bit of money. So it's kind of, it makes sense if you're on disability, you don't have much money coming in for revenue. The two usually match up pretty well together. And we get about 2 or 3 special assessment deferments a year just for, for a scope of about 700 to 1,000 that we process. So it's not a huge number of things that staff is having to search through. I don't know if we had any new ones this year. I think we had 3 that repeated from last year, if that helps understand the scope of what this is.
It does.
I'm not sure we want to add any definitions or discussions in here that reference state disability. I mean, it's a kind of a complicated process, and not everyone who is disabled is going to be on state disability funding, designations, et cetera. So, the way it's worded is kind of nice. It's just basically, if you swear to it, we'll assume that that's the case.
Okay. Others? Michael?
I'm just saying,
It was updated in 2018 or 2019 or so. So it's a pretty new ordinance that had gone through an update in the past 2 or 3 years or something like that. And I know the city attorneys looked at it and that sort of thing.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Michael?
But just as somebody that's been on disability most of my life, usually, at least for me, it was the Social Security Administration I had to go through. and then go through like county or something like that, if I wanted to. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, yeah, I guess I don't know what state disability means. I mean, it's just, because I've had to go through it through different routes. I mean, through Social Security Administration, if you're trying to get SSI, sometimes you just have to get a lawyer in order to get it, and it's like a 2 or 3 year court battle. But I don't know, I mean, that should, if you're like on SSI or SSDI, that should be an easy qualification right there in itself. But I mean, in order to get there, that's hard to get on that alone. And you probably wouldn't be, this is mainly for people who are working for the city or people who are elected? Is that how this works?
It's for a resident, if they have an assessment and they are eligible to have that assessment amount deferred. So they wouldn't have that financial obligation immediately. That would be deferred to a later date.
Gotcha, okay. So there's probably, yeah, there's a lot of routes on how this could be, I'm guessing, pinpointed.
When I personally hear that they say that they do 2 or 3 a year, then it doesn't sound like it's worth changing the process. Sounds like it's working pretty well, so.
I would also, Mr. Chair, like to suggest that that would actually make it harder for a disabled person to qualify, which would be contrary to our mission.
Anyone else?
No, I just agree with that because it's kind of similar to a reasonable accommodation where general, because you don't want to get too much. So if somebody's going through the purpose of medical, doctor, be whatever practitioner or field they're in, at good faith value, the city is accepting it. I would say that would be the best way, and it's also the easiest way for a person with a disability because they do have, in some form, typically a medical person in some field that can do this for them. So I think it pretty well covers, and it seems to have been working for them without any issues on it. And in that case, keeping it easier for those persons would be a better route to go.
Makes sense to me. I withdraw the thought. Thanks for the dialogue. I'll move forward unless there's. Is there anything else on chapter 9? Then we'll proceed to chapter 10. Do we have questions, comments on chapter 10? Yes.
Just a couple. I was looking at 110-2.
Okay.
They talked about the park infrastructures, again, super minor stuff, but getting in the weeds, should it also be defined as perhaps limited to? When they're describing, the type of structures that, are being suggested.
I guess.
Talking about the items that have been struck?
No, this is just something that I caught that I apparently did not be able to get it in time, so I just wanted to be able to bring that up now, or I should maybe ask first if that's even something that I can do.
I don't understand what you're saying. Are you suggesting like verbiage that would say the funds are limited to?
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Versus the fund may only be used to pay?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
But before I mention anything else, I just noticed a couple that, of mine that did not make it through, so.
Okay.
Maybe I don't bring them up now.
Okay. Well, generally speaking, do people think, this isn't an English class, but I think Godin had a really great point a couple of meetings ago about something that was was a lot easier to read after we looked through it. So do we think that this is hard to understand, or we can make it maybe easier to understand, or? A change like Josh is proposing, or suggesting the fund may be limited to.
Yeah. Only be used for seems reasonable to me.
Okay.
We're talking about 1.10.2?
Correct.
1-10.
Yeah.
First sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so the fund may only be used to pay for the cost of replacing streets and transportation-related assets in accordance with the provisions of this chapter.
Yep.
Yeah.
And your suggestion is to flip it to a
Just giving
negative.
it some definition, of, containment of, limited to. Is that what it is suggesting, that it's only, those structures?
It would only be for
Replacing
eligible streets and transportation-related assets, and those are pretty well defined in our CIP as far as what we use that for.
Okay.
So, for example, we've removed the sentence about parks infrastructure, so by default, parks infrastructure wouldn't be used for this, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, it's kind of a belt and suspenders at that point.
So is the question, and this is more of maybe a legal, the word may, the third word, instead should it state shall? Is shall more, does it box it in better, which is I think your point.
Is it permissive?
More definition.
And I think we've removed the shall and put will, which is the same. So,
We could do that, or you could even shorten it to say the fund is for the cost of replacing
Yeah.
streets, if you wanted to be,
yeah.
that much truncated, we could do that.
I think it just takes out any ambiguity.
Okay.
I think that's a great clarification. Thank you. Other items in chapter 10 that we'd like to call out? Josh?
Just one other one, talking about it's a 1-10.4-A.
110.4A. Okay.
And it says, should city's official newspaper, just curious if that is something that, again, we're taking a look at things that are old. Should that be updated to website or another, maybe more up-to-date way of describing how our citizens are receiving city information?
I had
It's been a while
a,
since I've had a newspaper.
I don't
Hasn't
see
that been
one
struck?
ten four A, it's been
It's
struck.
been struck.
Struck out.
yeah, I was actually kind of curious about that. Why was A and B struck? Like, why is the requirement for a public hearing on why, yes, Ryan, I see your hand.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also very, very involved with this. So when the infrastructure trust fund went into place, there was some things that were very procedural in nature that were used in order to make sure that things were being spent appropriately. And we've morphed into a situation where we always are putting the information into the backgrounds indicating when the infrastructure trust fund would be used. But I would say at this point, it's common knowledge we're going to use it for that, and we only do use it for that. And I think the best safeguard to make sure we do that is to continue to put those into our staff backgrounds. But it just adds a extra layer of administrative efforts to do something like put that in the newspaper and then hold a public hearing or something like that when it appears from my of doing these projects for a very long time that the appropriate safeguards are in place. The finance department is reviewing when we're spending the money, and the proposal would be following the strike-throughs and additions would follow generally the procedures that are occurring at this time. Okay.
I heard all of that except for the last little bit. Melanie?
I did also want to say, Chair, in addition to Brian, we do identify potential funding sources as we are preparing our CIP, our annual budget, and then as we refine projects. So there are several steps throughout the process by which we identify how we intend to, or we would propose a project be funded.
Okay.
So what, if I heard it right, there's internal procedures which takes care of the issues which were mentioned here. So this is redundant in a sense, although it's not exactly redundant, but giving more, let's say, more latitude or more for the procedure to take care of this issue.
Yeah, yes, I would agree with that a public hearing is unnecessary given the other process that we have in place. And that's why it's been suggested to be removed.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Eric?
And that's because the city council packet background effectively does the same thing. It's still a public meeting, you still
Got
have
it.
advance notice and all that.
You got it.
If we're gonna change my second comment was, if we're gonna change the 110.2 to the fund may only to something else, we should just carry that down to 110.3 as well, where it also says the fund may only for A and B. So if we're changing it to the fund will, or the fund is limited to, whatever we decide upon, just to change those as well.
Thank you. Other comments? A question that I had is, I'm sure that the city does assess a project to ensure that it has community benefits. Obviously, it's not in the code, but I don't think that's probably necessary. Can someone briefly comment how the city evaluates that? Like 110.4B1, it's struck out. The project has community benefits. I'm assuming the city does that, but it's just not in the code anymore.
Yeah, Ryan might hop on and, part of the work that our departments do is, he's gonna hop on and, Ryan, did you wanna take this one? Did you hear the question?
Yeah, it sounded like, how do we make sure that the benefits are there to spend the money?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very long process, as Melanie was describing before. There's the capital improvement plan, and then most of this is roadway improvements from the Infrastructure Trust Fund. And those are based upon a pavement management program that we have in place. So we're always trying to do the roads that are in the worst condition, replace those first. And for instance, last year when we do special assessments, as we talked about earlier in the meeting, and we didn't have one person come in and say, the road we're trying to replace is in plenty good condition, why are you doing this? And they're all having to pay $1,000, $2,000 for the road to occur. So on those large projects like that, there's lots of different ways that the public is getting involved and has an opportunity to be involved if they feel that the public benefit isn't there. But we very much are trying to get the best bang for our buck and spend the tax dollars as wise as we possibly can.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other items on chapter 10? I did have one item on chapter 10, and I guess it would be for chapter 12 as well. I had a question about should the procedure for using funds, should there be codification around the reporting requirements? So in my background on boards, it's pretty standard that you might say have a balance sheet or statements of revenue and expenditures, and those be yearly, something like that, to say here's how we're spending the money, and that be submitted. And maybe that's already happening, but that would be a requirement. Maybe someone can comment if, I'm sure people are obviously accounting for the dollars. How can someone like me find how the money's being spent?
Mr. Chair, I'd ask Stephanie Killian, our Assistant Finance Director, to maybe find a chair with a microphone and help to answer that.
So Donna or Joshua, maybe? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would say that there are several reporting requirements at various times throughout the year. We're required by law to have audited financial statements. We're required by law to present a budget to our council to adopt. And then each month, our internal controls lay out procedures where we ensure that we're preparing financials, we're reconciling accounts. So there are several, I would say, different ways that we meet various reporting requirements. I don't know if that answers your question.
How does the average citizen, if they wanted to see those reports, how would they find them or get them if they were interested?
Well, it is public information, so those requests can always come in to the city and to the finance department. We are also moving towards an online interactive financial reporting tool. It's not quite as robust as we would like it to be at this point in time, but we're gonna continue to develop that. So citizens can log right on, get to our website, and go to our financial information. But certainly, in the interim, if those details aren't out there that they want to see, those questions can come directly into the finance department or our communications department.
Excellent. Greg?
Also to add to Stephanie's comments, working with the council, staff has created a new budget kind of landing page on our website. It's burnsvillemn.gov/budget, which has direct access to the dashboarding and the interactive content that Stephanie has talked about, and that's where we'll continue to kind of build that out. That site also contains the council-adopted budget in the form of a fairly lengthy budget book that explains the intricate details, but there's also a new dashboarding tool that really provides a high-level interactive process where the public can kind of click into their preferred areas of detail and kind of get at some of that more granular financial information. So it's a work in progress, but burnsvillemn.gov/budget.
Thank you. Steve?
Let me ask just a clarifying question. So is there a process, and maybe it's the dashboard, that the city council would review the list of projects that were selected that year, the budget and the actuals, and whether it was completed?
I would say that, I would say that process begins with the adoption of the budget. We have a detailed CIP, construction improvement plan, that we're required to present for adoption by the council. And that outlines all of the projects, and it also defines which funding source is going to pay for each of those projects, because there's different eligibilities that have to be met. So that's really the first process in presenting that. And then throughout the year, as various contracts are entered into, as work begins, it was referred to earlier in the council packets. All of that information is detailed out in the agenda items that is presented and needs to be approved by the council. So that happens throughout the year as projects begin to take place and work begins. And then lastly, I would say the audited financial statements, the review of our financials, is the last check and monitoring point that verifies that funds are used as they are intended, that as the council has directed us to use them, and appropriate funding sources are used to pay for those expenditures by project. So it's back to that, when we started, to get approved, to get the council approval to start, and then ongoing approvals by the council, and then it culminates with the financial statement audit.
So maybe a follow-up question. So on your dashboard, would an intent be to say in the planning process, there's 52 projects you selected for 2022, and the cost of those are whatever it is? And at the end of the year, when you close your books, is there a summary document that said, of the 52 projects we planned at a budget of this is how we actually came in?
The short answer is yes.
Perfect.
Longer answer, and I'll make sure that the task force has this information, that not only is part of the audited financial statements, per Stephanie's comments, in part of that budget landing or transparency portal that we've mentioned, we also do monthly community and council reports that measure and monitor progress on all of the council's strategic priorities. Transportation and infrastructure is one of those. So we detail out progress on a monthly basis to the community via those forums as well. So we'll make sure that this group has access and direct links to those resources. And that's something that we commonly communicate through the Burnsville Bulletin, online in our social media accounts, kind of our web pushes, those types of things. So we'll make sure that you all have access to those as well, so you can kind of see for yourself some of it in action.
Thank you very much. Any remaining items on Chapter 10? Chapter 11? Nancy?
My question is duly noted here, but the language of the actual code hasn't changed, so maybe I'm just confused. One sentence is, we're only gonna have a primary if we have more than twice the number, and then it says, but everyone's gonna run in a primary. Which seems contradictory. So
Good catch.
all right. So it perhaps language that they shall run in a primary election if there are more than twice the number of candidates as spots.
Would we just remove that last sentence, Mac?
I think we just, if
All
we
right.
strike that sentence. I
Got
think
it.
Okay. That's a great point. I read that as well, and I was very confused.
And what is the purpose for requiring the primary? Is it just to narrow it down? I mean, I see in a partisan race why you do it, but for a non-partisan race.
Go ahead.
The primary is established so that there are times that sometimes a city may have 10 or 20 or more people running for one or two seats, and the primary is established to get that number down to double the number of seats that are available. In our city council, sometimes we've had 5 or 6 people running, and then it has narrowed the field down to 4 for the general election. I think that it was put into place when we did have a very large ballot one year. This was, we had like over a dozen, and they said, this is too many to have on one ballot. Let's have a primary, narrow it down.
I would say it's fairly common. Yeah.
I was wondering, 111.3 results, it says within 2 or 3 days after the primary. I was wondering, why not just pick one, like 3? Since.
Statute says
2
2 or 3, and we can only do it in 2 if the county allows us to. And it said in here that it was 2, and I realized that we weren't doing 2 very often because there's so much work to be done. We weren't getting it done in 2. So I amended it so that it is in line with the state statute that we can do it in 2 or 3 days. We can only do it in 2 if the county is supportive of us doing that.
Okay, interesting. Thanks.
Mac, if we change it to within 3 days after the primary, would that give us flexibility, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 days?
The statute specifically says it has to be 2 or 3. It couldn't be 1 day, right?
Gotcha.
So that's why I put that in there. I know.
Can't canvass on the first day, okay.
Legislature.
Other, that's a bizarre one.
We're just getting started.
Other items on Chapter 11. Okay, Chapter 12. And again, I had that same question about the reporting, but that's already been answered, so thank you very much. All right, so I believe that will conclude reviewing chapters 7 through 12. And that'll take us on to item 7, which is miscellaneous items in our agenda.
Can I?
Yes.
So process-wise, this, chapter 7 through 12 will come back at our next meeting with these very final changes for us to approve those? Okay.
That's correct. Yep. And I will not shut you down. when you say,
I move to approve. Chop, chop, here we go.
So like, check it off.
That's right. I am Jay.
You're not a task-oriented person.
so, the next code review task force meeting will be November 17th, 2021, 5:30 PM here in the council chambers. This is a week earlier than usual due to the Thanksgiving holiday. Our homework is to review Title II, which is included in tonight's packet. Task force comments need to be submitted by Wednesday, November 3rd. Please note, this is only 1 week from today. I would personally encourage people, if they get the chance, several members have already commented, please go through and read those comments. I think that would make the discussion for next time very productive beforehand. Title III, Chapter 1 has also been provided in the packet, so we can begin our review, as it is an extensive chapter. Comments on Title III, Chapter 1 will be due by Wednesday, December 1st.
Say that again.
Comments on Title III, Chapter 1 will be due by Wednesday, December 1st.
December?
Yep. I believe, yes, Mac.
He's talking about for chapter, for
For
Title
three.
III, yes. We're only doing Title
We have a
II.
long time to review it.
We're right, but because the item because chapter three, or Title III is so extensive, and specifically the liquor license, city code is very extensive, and so we just wanted to give you more time to
Thank
start
you.
thinking about it and,
Yep.
and be able to really, it can get very confusing, and I think that there's some things that, staff is gonna also suggest that, to make some changes there.
Yeah, I got confused about what was due when, and I was like, am I behind here? I thought that
Next
was all
month
the-
is Title II,
Title II.
and then for December, it'll be Title
Probably
III.
reviewed.
I thought I was behind, I'm feeling good now.
And the Dropbox has been updated with the schedule and with the items for, with these packet items for us to be able to review as well.
We're gonna carefully review.
Are there any other items? Yes.
I did just want to clarify, Chair, we had talked about just providing an update to the task force about updating to the council.
Yes.
Would you
And I am available.
Would you like me to provide that to the?
Please do.
Okay, so one of the responsibilities of the task force is to periodically report back to the council on the status of this. Since we're only a couple months in, I talked with the chair about having him come to an upcoming work session sometime first quarter of 2022, where he would just provide a summary of the changes, the discussion, kind of the depth and breadth and scope of the task force. So just so you know, that'll be coming forward, and we'll probably do that, I would say, maybe Q4 of 2022 as well.
Mr. Chair, I want to add something. Well, you go ahead and then I'll add toward the end.
Title III, could we get an overview of kind of the thoughts behind the liquor licensing? And maybe as it contrasts to other local cities like Lakeville or whatever?
And
Boy, that's a quick question.
would you like us to part the Red Sea before then, or no? That's a great question. I take that very seriously. Mac, I think you know a lot about this. Can you comment on that?
I definitely can do a little research to see if our city code is like way more complicated than other city codes are. And I have worked for 2 different cities, and they actually seem pretty similar to what I'm used to. So I don't know that there are other cities out there. Maybe Joel, who works with several cities, may have some more insight for me on that. But you know, we do have certain limitations that we have to have in the code because statute requires that if we're the granting authority, that we follow this process. And there are some things in there that maybe we're more strict on, or that we can relax our regulations on and that kind of thing. So I will maybe do a little survey of some area cities and see if there's some distinct differences that we have that we should be looking at.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more thing about the liquor. We have distance between a lot of our stores in many parts of the city. The County Road 42 is a different animal for us. A lot of those are in place because at one time in our city codes, you had to build a freestanding building to have a liquor store. And so a lot of liquor store owners put a huge investment in it. And they like that investment kind of protected, and so we have codes in place to kind of do that, because there are people that have millions of dollars in buildings.
Sure, they probably do in their
Yep.
Subway shop too, but.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, some of the thinking behind why you have the distances and that, and part of your job is gonna be to wade through all that and give us
Yeah.
your
Hence
suggestions.
the little background.
Yep.
And for some of those topics, the council's had extensive governance meetings where there's been white papers and all of that presented on this. And they've had to weigh out those considerations in the past, so I'll maybe provide a little background for that as well.
That would be good.
Yeah, that was most recently discussed, I think, in late 2019, early 2020. We did a review of the liquor license code and said, you know, what are we above and beyond what the state requires, and let's have that conversation. So we can see where that stands now. I think there might be one or two provisions. Provide that context for you.
I think that's a great idea. What do you think would be a great medium for that? Do you think that a short presentation at next month's meeting on here's some of the context and here's a comparison of us to our local municipalities would be helpful? Or do you think something for us to read and digest beforehand would be helpful? Or what do we think would be helpful and what would be reasonable and not overly burdensome?
I'm fine with for the timing wise is the only thing I would have a question on. Would we want that at the November meeting or
at
the
the
December meeting? The December is when we're gonna start talking about. Would you like to have it beforehand so that you could think about it during your review?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Understood.
think beforehand would be
Okay.
great. So I think if you could prepare a presentation to inform us, that would be amazing.
And just for a point of clarification, you're looking for where we lie with our comparison cities and anything that might be above and beyond state statute.
I believe that's it, and then maybe just a little bit of background information on
Our
I'll
history.
give you one of my more specific things. In there, it talks about, it seemed to be like the mall or something where you couldn't provide alcohol in the parking lot kind of language. What confused me was they had the concerts at Buck Hill on the Hill. Kind of how do you address public gatherings? Or like they have the Bite of Burnsville and they have it outside and you have a cup of beer, right? So a little bit around that kind of stuff. That make sense?
Minnesota liquor laws are an interesting animal.
Very much so.
Very protective.
I can tell you from a nonprofit, and I've done it before, for a fundraiser, to pull a temporary 3-2 liquor license. I think it's like a 30-day lead time, and you apply to the city, and you can do that kind of a thing.
So maybe it's all in there, we just gotta get to it. Here's what you do if you're gonna have a gathering or something. Okay.
Also, before we adjourn, I just would like to encourage, we're gonna get into a lot of things here, you're already seeing that happening. I would encourage everybody in this room to take time over the next few months to drive through the city, kind of look at our city, see what's going on and that, so as we get into this discussions on certain areas, that you know how different neighborhoods are looking and what's going on in these neighborhoods and our business centers as well. I think it would be important just to get out there and do that.
Do a ride along with one of the cops, that was fun.
Interesting.
I've got 3 boys and training how to drive right now, so I've got a wonderful opportunity.
I leave that to my husband, he's doing our youngest now.
On the least traveled roads.
Right. Well, I want to thank everyone. If there are no additional items, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. All right, motioned by Jensen. Can I get a second? Seconded by Roush. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay and raise your hand. The motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, sir.